Okay, here we go. Double recording. Okay, so this is going to be about what I call jobs to be done thinking, which is basically the jobs to be done framework uh, expanded by some of the Amplio components, and it's more complete in my opinion, and more fit into product development, which is of course what the jobs to be done framework is about, and that's what these little outside things here are. And I'm going to go through most of these. You'll see. The idea is basically how to use the job to be done framework in a very effective way. And what I'm going to do today is we're going to, in a sense, have 4 little mini seminars. And what I'd like you to do, I'm hoping to get through each one in about 10 minutes and then give 5 minutes Q&A. But if you misunderstand something I said or like totally violently opposed to it, then it's okay to interrupt me. But otherwise, I'll give 5 minutes for each of the 4. And this part is just about 5 minutes as a quick overview. So I start with the jobs to be done framework, but what I want to do is look at it in the context of product development, not just in the idea of what you're going to build, which is typically how the jobs to be done framework is used. So jobs to be done thinking is this bigger view, and I'm going to talk about that first. What is the jobs to be done framework? So if you don't know what that is, that's fine. I'm presuming no basis knowledge in it. But then I'm going to go into one of the powers of the job to be done framework is perspectives. And why is it useful to have such a big perspective shift? Actually, I'm going to mention this in the first session, but I'm going to really talk about it in the second. Because we talk about mindsets a lot, we should be talking about perspectives more. To me, they're more powerful way for change. And then I'm going to talk about how jobs to be done. This is where we have to get into maybe the jobs to be done thinking approach, the expanded Amplio view about how it creates alignment. Amplio is basically, you could say, an approach based on the physics of flow to solve your problems. But it also has, and by physics of flow, I mean the theories of flow, lean theory of constraints, that tells you how things and why things are going on the way they are. While there is complexity, there's a lot of stuff we can take advantage of to solve our issues. Jobs to be done thinking, by using the framework of this is what we're trying to accomplish, can help align everybody. Alignment is very useful. It can solve a lot of problems. It's looking at the bigger picture. You probably heard things about that. Value stream management, flow. This is all bigger picture stuff. And then I'll do a quick view on the whole additions of how jobs to be done thinking it incorporates, because jobs to be done framework, to be candid, is already very close to having things like design thinking in it, close to human-centered design, based on the design of everyday things by Don Norman. But then also there are workflow improvements. Now, I'm not going to have time to go through each of these 3 in detail. I have other talks on each of these 3, but it's when you, again, kind of point the arrow with jobs to be done framework to see what you want to do. You can add things to it we'll see design thinking enables us to go through it, things in a little bit more linear way, which is good. And design things so people like to use them, which is something, when I started programming in the 70s, the joke at the time was, what's a programmer's favorite language? And the answer is profanity. But nowadays you could say, what's the user's most favorite language? Profanity. Oh, that stupid computer, profanity, expletive, deleted. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to spend about 10 minutes on each one of those 4 topics, and we'll have a little bit of Q&A in each one. It's all the same meeting. We're just going to kind of go through it as we go. Okay. And how these all work together is also a part of it. It makes the sum being greater than the parts, which is something that tends to be forgotten. You cannot get a lot of, if you get a lot of good teams working together really well, but they work as teams and they don't work as a whole, there's huge rework. My contention is that agile product development is much, much, much easier than most people are experiencing. And the reason they're having problems is because they don't acknowledge certain things. Many people in the agile space not only don't acknowledge it, they deny it. This is some of the theories of flow and lean and theory of constraints that we can see what's going on. Yes, there's complexity. Yes, we will hit it, or it hits us. Actually, it feels more like that than us hitting it. And there are ways to protect ourselves from it. I'll talk a little bit about that or mention that. But that mostly people are looking at things the wrong way and doing the wrong things and leaving some things out. And that's why it's so difficult. And if we start paying attention to it, we can solve the problems we face. We do not need to do an awful lot of new things. Okay, so here's the first section. What is the jobs to be done framework? Now I'm going to talk about the framework, the core part that I'm using that I get extended with thinking. So this is to me one of the guiding forces in requirements. We want to understand our requirements so that as they change, because we know they will, jobs to be done does not say our requirements don't change. But the point is, are we able to minimize rework from the change? And it can do that. Okay, this is the key. How do we, in the face of changing requirements, not have a lot of rework done? And if you think about it, waterfall is the antithesis of that. It causes all rework because it's a bad approach, because it doesn't get any feedback till the end. Agile methods are designed to help this in general by getting us feedback so we can see if we're going in the right direction. You know, we do need an overall view, but we don't need the detail. This is one of the issues that happens is people think, oh, well, we can't get all the detail, so let's just deal with this piece. No, you want the overall view, but then you want to take things a little bit at a time. What do we need to look at to enable discovery of new items to not cause us rework? This is a lean mantra. Now in lean, they talk about eliminating waste and things like that. But lean comes out of manufacturing. In fact, there's also lean product development, but lean manufacturing talks about waste because it's a good term, because you're in a factory and you can see the waste on the floor. You don't see waste in software. You don't even see rework in software because once it's done, it's been done. There's no visibility to happen, except maybe you've got lousy code, but most people from the outside can't see that. But rework can be seen. So I use the word rework. And if you want to hear waste, that's fine. I really mean them kind of synonymously. The other thing, it's easy to see when rework is not necessary. Some people have redefined and bastardized the term waste in lean. Proper planning is not waste. Using the definition, if it doesn't add value to the customer, it's waste. Well, what is adding value to the customer? If you're doing something that gets the value to the customer faster, that's adding value to them, then proper planning might do that. So we don't want to, I don't want to use the word waste just because of all the connotation it has. Okay, so jobs to be done. So this comes from Ulwick and Christensen. Both of these books, great references. I like them both. Ulwick talks a little bit more about marketing. Christensen talks a little bit more about it, I'd say in a pragmatic way. They were both published in October 2016. I think people acknowledge Ulwick got the idea, but Christensen and Ulwick independently worked on the idea and developed their own kind of thoughts about it, but they're very, very consistent. He calls it competing against luck. Christensen, not jobs to be done. Well, that title was taken, but he's talking about jobs to be done because he's saying if you don't do jobs to be done, if you don't look at what you're trying to accomplish, you might as well be just hope for luck. So you're competing against luck by doing something intelligent. So you're looking to see what's the job that's trying to be accomplished. It focuses on the progress that's there. And by identifying the jobs, we can identify solutions aligned with real goals and not just service level requests. So most people are using wants and needs, but again, we're not trying to be complete. It's trying to guide us so we minimize unnecessary work. Puts our focus on stakeholders, not the system. See, wants and needs turn into features of the system, not things that the user or customer or consuming stakeholder, as I call it, are using. We want to focus on them, not on our system. We shift from solutions to what we're trying to accomplish. This avoids becoming feature factories because otherwise people are just kind of going through the motion. Oh, I got these stories to build. See, this is an important thing to recognize. The behavior you're getting is due to the system you're operating in, and that's due to the way the system is designed. Most agile systems are actually designed to be ineffective. I don't mean intentionally designed. I did not mean that. They didn't design the Pinto so it would blow up, but that was how it was designed. In fact, in their case, it may have been more of a conscious decision. There's the gas tank thing. It's old, a long time back. The Corvair might be a better example because they certainly did not design that to roll over, or they didn't even know it would roll over, but that's how it was designed. Systems with people in it, same thing. We want to recognize that the best solution in the world is no good if it solves the wrong problem. Just think about this for a second. Wants and needs gets us focused on problems. Why? Because that's what the customer is looking at, what their problems are. So they tell us what they want and need to overcome those problems. It's funny, we talk about, developers talk about, well, don't give us your problems. We'll come up with, don't give us your solutions, rather, we'll come up with the solutions. But when they give problems or they give solutions in the form of wants and needs, we're still focused on predefined problems. They may be the wrong ones to solve. There might be a better problem to solve. There might be a way to eliminate the problem, not overcome the problem. So we don't want to look at wants and needs. We want to look at what job are we trying to accomplish? How do we innovate? And this is a critical insight that seems to be missed a lot of times. We do not think and talk about what we see. We see what we're able to think and talk about. Edgar Schein talks about this. The way we see the problem is the problem. Covey talks about it that way. Jobs to be done gives us a different way of looking at it. So what do we mean by job? It's the progress that a person is trying to make in a particular circumstance. This definition is not simply a way of categorizing their problems. It's really the key. It's like they do this, then they do this, then they do this, then they do this, then they do this. Now, it's not just a problem that arises. It could be it's the resolution of something and avoid the struggle. The key piece is this. If it sounds like this and this and this and this and this, oh, that sounds like the customer journey, for those of you who are familiar with it. Well, actually, that's how you could understand the jobs, is what are the journeys? And you might say, what is the way we're going to improve the customer journey? But what we're really talking about is not necessarily their existing customer journeys. If they have one, sometimes you're actually creating something they're not doing. You're competing against nothing in this case, giving them an alternative. But if there is a customer journey, if they are doing it, that's a good place to mine information so we can pay attention to that. But then what we want to do is redefine what are the best steps to solve their real issues. Okay, and that's called job mapping. I'm not going to go into that, but that is part of jobs to be done. Okay, a job is typically a process. This comes from Christensen's book, Competing Against Luck, but consistent with Ulwick. Okay. So jobs to be done in innovation. Let's take a look at this. So what are people trying to accomplish? So this is a story, and I never knew this. I don't know if this has ever been published, but I knew somebody who knew him. He was a business consultant of mine, actually, and he had these amazing stories. He seemed to know a lot of people. This is how I got in touch with Buckminster Fuller. I never met him either, but I've got some really great stories about Bucky Fuller. Anyway, Akio Morita was the CEO of Sony at the time. And what happened was he traveled a lot. And he noticed that people had a commitment to music and health. In his case, he had a commitment to music while moving, while traveling. But nothing existed to do both. There was no product. This was back in the 60s. And what he noticed was that people had boomboxes, say, and they were committed to fitness. The story goes that he was up in Rockefeller Center or someplace in a hotel there where he was staying, and he's looking down on Central Park in New York City, and he sees these people. Remember the boom boxes? They used to carry them around all the time on your shoulder, and that was exercise enough. Maybe carrying a boom box was exercise enough. But he also saw people running without boom boxes because they were just jogging. Okay, now if you saw somebody running with a boom box and it's Central Park in New York City, that's another story. But you get the idea. He saw people committed to music like he was, and he saw people committed to health, jogging, but they couldn't do both like he couldn't do both. So he had empathy because he traveled and he liked classical music. So he got the idea, what if you had a small player, not a recorder, but a player? Now, the idea of a tape player was new and unique. In fact, he had a hard time getting his own people to build one. He said, hey, I want a tape player. They came back with a smaller tape recorder. He said, no, I don't want a tape recorder. I want a small tape player. And they couldn't get that. Why would you possibly have a player? Because at the time, nobody made tapes just to play. Oh, they made the tapes. But I mean, people liked recording their own tapes, I should say, the little cassettes and things. So, and if you wanted to make your own music, that was a good piece of it because records were the big thing. That was a big thing. Then you would need a way to record it. So they went back, they made it even smaller. And he said, no, this happened 2 or 3 times until he finally said, if you bring me another recorder, I'm firing you all. I'm going to get a bunch of engineers who do what I am asking you to do. I need a player. Now, he knew this because if you make it a recorder, you've got to have the heads more complicated. You've got to add costs. You've got to add space. He's trying to make it small and cheap. They finally gave him, and the birth of the Walkman happened. There's another way to look at this. So this was innovation by looking at what was there, seeing the needs, wants and needs, but nobody's going to say what I want as a tape player because there is no such thing. By the way, you look at great innovation, it almost is always done this way. Maybe not with the jobs to be done approach, but by looking at what's really in the values, what people want to have happen. So Ulwick, not Ulwick, Christensen tells the story of the milkshake. I think this is a good example too. He had been commissioned to do some marketing and improve the sales of milkshakes at a fast food chain. And what he saw was that they decided to then see what's going on, and they saw something interesting. A lot of the people who were buying milkshakes were executive style, not executive maybe, but professional. They had suits, they were buying milkshakes, and they were that's all they bought. They just went in and got a milkshake and left. And he thought, well, this is kind of odd. It's not the persona you would expect, middle-aged men in suits buying milkshakes. So he decided to talk to them. Makes sense. Hey, why are you buying a milkshake? And what they said was that they were buying a milkshake because they had a commute and the drive was boring and the milkshake kind of formed a kind of entertainment. You sip on it every few seconds. It was easy to hold, put it in the cup holder. So it was kind of spill proof. They haven't met me. I can spill anything. But anyway, it was mostly spill proof. And it filled them up, tasted good. So entertainment, filled them up, tasted good, was neat, relatively inexpensive. And that's why they were buying it. You ever buy a burrito or buy an egg sandwich, somehow whatever it is, it gets on your lap. Okay, they do have napkins for that, but easier not to have the problem. So the job, what's the job a milkshake is for? This is actually kind of interesting that they hadn't quite realized that. And the job is for the person you're talking to, like the person that's using it. And you got to look at their context. So this is also what's interesting. In the afternoon, they saw milkshakes were being bought by a different group of people. They were being bought more by parents. Probably the same people are getting milkshake in the morning, but in the afternoon, they were bringing their kids in to get a milkshake. It was a good parental thing. Hey, let's go get some ice cream. Oh, let's go get a milkshake. Oh, whatever. So it's not the person that's important. It's the context the person is in. This is a big shift right there. I'll talk about this in a few minutes. That jobs to be done shifts from like the demographics. So you notice if you talk about middle-aged white people who are middle-aged men going into work, then where you've got this demographic. I mean, I didn't mean to imply white here, but it just popped out because of the picture. Anything here, if you do it by race, you do it by level of society, whatever you see these people and you focus it. It's so natural to focus on people that way instead of what is the context they're in. The context they're in is he's going to work and this guy's with his kid and they're getting a milkshake, but different reasons. So what they came up with is how do you get milkshakes in the morning more easily? How do you have it be a better parental thing? So the job shifts, even if the product is the same. So job mapping is a way to do this. You don't, and I'm not going to go through what it is. I'm just letting you know it's present. So in job mapping, you actually go through the question, what are the steps? What is involved? How do you design the product to fill the job in a better way? That's really one of the aspects of jobs to be done thinking. So in summary, and then we got a couple minutes for questions. In summary, we've got that we're shifting from the product to what's the job it's fulfilling. And we're shifting from the demographic of the person to the context they're in within which that job is taking place. Okay, so I got a couple of minutes for questions if you have some, and we'll just go on to the next one. Or we're good. Okay, great. And you could ask questions about any of these at any time. I mean, at the end, each one will have. Okay. So perspective shifts. So in the 80s, the reason I got so excited about Jobs to Be Done, which happened and came out in 2016, was because in the 80s, I did some work with a man named, Fernando Flores, who's now actually back in Chile. But at the time, he was expatriate of Chile because he was a political prisoner. And he's written some work. He worked in the computer field, built some amazing things. But what was really different was the way he had us shift perspectives. Instead of looking at things like they were absolutely real, like my software system. Most devs think about their computer system. They think about this is what I'm building, and then they explain how it works. Well, that is a real problem, because what happens then is people don't really think of this, that there's not really this objective world out there that you describe, and then people see your objective view of it. I mean, just look at anything, particularly politics nowadays. But there is no out reality out there. Maybe there is, but we all look at it differently. That's the important point. We look at it and we have our own internal conversation, and our conversation about it is kind of what I mean by perspective. And I would suggest, oh, push the wrong button. There we go. I would suggest that perspective is very important, how we look at something. And that's why I have that little picture. You can see, you look at it one way, you look at it a different way, you see something different. Perspective's a blend of both what you look at and how you relate to it. A mindset is an habitual pattern of thought that shapes how a person interprets situations, makes decisions, and responds to challenges. There's this thing I named automatic interpretive reframing, which is how people automatically, without even thinking about it, reinterpret what's been put in front of them. And they have this running conversation as you are right now. Just pause for a second. I'm going to be quiet. I want you to listen to the conversation in your head as I'm not talking about, as I'm not talking. Now, you might have said, what conversation? That's the conversation. You might have said, oh, this guy is brilliant. Okay, the smart ones of you would think that, and some of you might not be getting, so what's got it's full of shit. No, sorry, just kidding, just kidding. But you notice how you're continuously judging things. This is important, because when we design systems, they're not really paying attention to the system. They're paying attention to the thoughts in their head about the system. That's why profanity is so popular. The thing to remember is, I believe perspectives are more important than all but one mindset. The one mindset is, you need to have the mindset that nothing is sacred and that I will learn and I will rethink things. If you have that one mindset, that one attitude, then what you look at is more important. How you're viewing things is more important. So something that shifts your perspective is really useful. And I think it's easier to shift perspectives than it is to shift mindsets. Oh, that's good. That's fortunate. I think that's true. So Jobs to Be Done considered mostly about perspective shifts, from features and personas to progress and outcomes. This is key. What progress is the customer trying to make? Notice how when you ask when you say what features do I need, your focus is on the system. When you say what progress is the customer trying to make, it's on them. It's really simple as that. Now, the problem is there's what's called inertia. I'll coin a term here, perspective inertia. Yeah, I know I'm supposed to look at that, but I just keep coming back to this. Boy, speaking of personal experience, have I got that one? And sometimes we even know we're supposed to look at this, but we still look at this. I don't know why, but I kind of do. It's sort of psychological, but it happens. So yes, just knowing what to look at doesn't mean you will look at it. But if you don't even know you should be looking at it, you have no chance. This is why teams can be great. This is why I believe team leaders and team coaches need to be more responsible for injecting certain ideas into teams. See, telling people why something will work, that this will work, that's a lot different than telling them what to do. People have confused these two. A good coach will make people aware of things and let them know what to look at. That doesn't mean he's telling them what to do or she's telling them what to do. So this is really critical. We need to get to perspective shifts. And this is why in the Amplio system, we have templates and things to remind you, because it's just so easy to forget. So the first one is demographics. I already talked about this in the Jobs to Be Done. It's not so much the person driving into work. It's not so much the person like who's got an executive looking job. or a professional looking job as much as it is um, as much as it is um, a a person who's commuting to work. So they want to look at, now here's a different example, but a 40-year-old exec, a 20-year-old student want to hire Uber when stuck in the rain. It doesn't matter what they are, who they are, it matters what context they're in. So this is one shift. Segment by situation, not persona. So it's useful for the marketing. We want to go from features to progress, not what's part of the system, but what is the job they're trying to get done. What are the steps, step by step by step? Like the milkshake gave them a step to get to work. What should we build? Rather, what's the progress the customers made? Notice how each one of these naturally does something to shift what we tend to look at out of perspective inertia to what we should be looking at. Spotify's offline. It's not a feature. Well, it is, but it really is a way. How can you use Wi-Fi in a gym? Because I can just offline the stuff. I'm guaranteed. And this is important. I go to a lot of places, when I travel, most of the places I have gyms. And some of the gyms are actually located in different, they're shared gyms. So I got Wi-Fi in where I'm staying, but I don't have Wi-Fi when I go to the gym. Well, now I don't have to worry about it. Okay. Again, an easy shift. I want you to be, actually, I'm going to step back a second because I talk about systems. Notice how the whole what's the job? Notice how that just framing of it causes these shifts. This is what I mean by the design of a system. It naturally changes the perspective. Wants and needs are going to be based on problems. Solutions become limited because you're only looking at what solves these problems, but it may not be the problems you want to solve. Maybe you can avoid the problems. Maybe you can have them take a completely different path. Their needs, often they're not clear. Again, going to outcomes. This is consistent with the output to outcome shift that you hear a lot about. Shared measurement language between marketing and development emerges. This is useful to create alignment across things. I want healthier meals becomes more specific. Business analysts translate wants into measurable outcomes. Instead of looking at competitors, we want to look at solutions. In fact, there may be alternatives to nothing's happening, like using a Walkman. See, competitors are any alternative, including non-consumption, meaning there is no solution. I'm just creating something new for the first time. It broadens what we can be doing, okay? Look beyond the industry. Solution first goes to problem discovery. Devs notoriously say, don't give us your problems, give us your solution. Don't give us your solutions, give us your problems. But if you've got a problem, what are you going to do with it? You're going to solve it. Well, what if it's the wrong problem? People don't ask that question. Instead of looking at the problems they're facing, we want to start with what they're trying to get accomplished. There might be a different alternative. Design thinking talks a lot about this, by the way. In fact, this is a core design thinking piece. I'm not going to really go into design thinking in this session. We talk about it more in detail in Amplio. By the way, this 1 hour here, I'm covering some of the salient points of what basically is a 2 or 3 day course spread out over 3 months in jobs to be done thinking. I'm starting again next year, and we're doing in the Amplio workshop now. But what you want to do is in design thinking, which is really well known for coming up with its problem discovery and how we do things. The thing that's good about design thinking, I think jobs to be done at some level is more powerful, but design thinking has a nice linear aspect to it that I was in that little diagram I have on it. So I incorporate design thinking into the jobs to be done framework because it gives a little better structure for how to kind of walk through what you need to do. So instead of looking at wants and needs and then finding solutions, we want to look at what's their job and how do we develop solutions? What are better ways to do it? you know, the implic, I'll just let you read this. These are what's out there. I've got 8 of these totally. Okay. Instead of it being a transaction, it's not, shouldn't it be one and done? You know, how do you keep the customer happy with the product? So part of jobs to be done thinking, it lays out this whole, evolutionary development of the product. In other words, look at how I'm not saying Steve Jobs did jobs to be done thinking. He obviously didn't, because a lot of the work he did was before that came out. But it's very consistent with it. He came out with, here, we're going to do these steps, then we're going to add these steps, and we're going to add these steps, until now you've got this full-blown system on a phone. I can do it all on my phone, but I get all the same jobs, all the progress. So it's something you can evolve. Very consistent with agile thinking is why I bring this up. Instead of user stories, which are, I want this so that whatever, notice it's focused on the persona. We just shift it to job stories, which is basically as a, whatever. When I'm in this situation, I want to do this so I can get this value. It's easy to write, but it shifts the perspective. So this is job stories. Developers and product owners declare why a feature matters. This helps stop feature factories. In Agile, it's almost ubiquitous now that you have a product owner between the customer and the teams. And one of the things this does is it disconnects the teams from the why they're doing what they're doing. Yeah, I know it says it in here, but there's no real background. So this helps solve that. Okay, just a couple examples here. Okay, and the last one, instead of building in pieces, which is typically how it's done, but you get these features and you put them together, we're looking at the whole thing. This is very critical, by the way. There's a good book, I cannot remember his last name, Bent is his first name, How Big Things Get Done, which is brilliant and flies in the face of much agile thinking, although it's really consistent with the intention of agile. See, Agile work great as a team, but when you start putting it together across large organizations and large projects, it fails in many ways. And one of the reasons is that it is, again, perspective. And the other reason is most people still believe in the iron triangle. I'm not going to go there now, but the iron triangle was disproven. That scope, time, and cost are kind of the relationships fixed. Toyota disproved this, by the way, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s anyway. So the point I'm saying is one of the key pieces is you got to look at the whole. Working it down is one critical aspect of improving the efficiency. And by efficiency, I mean how much value you get over effort, not how much just output do you produce. That's not efficient at all. So this is an important piece. You need to be attending to the whole, or the parts interact with each other and can potentially create a lot of disasters. Okay, I've just got this up here as a summary of the 8 things. I'm going to leave that there while I'm asking you for questions, if there are any.
Hello.
Oh yeah, please, it'll be easy.
So I wanted to talk more about how you will measure progress, because you talked about shifting from
Ah,
features to progress. Yeah.
yes. Let's go back to that, and it's great question. Okay. Well, okay, so we shift from features to progress. So first of all, this right here just means that what we're looking at is building. Instead of features, we're going to look at progress to step. And then you asked this other question, which is great, which actually, let me just stick with a summary. Because then it's a question of how do you measure that? I thought I had something about measurement, but maybe I didn't. But here's how you measure it then. See, instead of looking at your system, you're looking at the customer. How is the customer progressing? How effective are they? So let's go with the milkshakes again. So we got milkshakes. We have, well, you can talk about how many are being sold as an overall metric, but we can also now, if we understand the job is for convenience, we can ask them, is there a way we can make this more convenient? Oh, well, some people don't like straws. You notice now actually cups on top you can either stick a straw in or you can pull something up to drink from. That's a more convenient. So you can say, how much better am I doing in the job of convenience? how much better am I doing in the job of it being safe to not spill? So you can actually measure the progress the customer makes with your product, not just how much are you selling your product or how fast are you building your product. So, I don't think I put that in there. I thought I had something like that, but that would be how you would measure. That's how you would do metrics. This gives you another competitive advantage because now you can not only measure the overall, but you can see how to refine the internal pieces. Does that help?
Yes, so if I understand you correctly, you are basically making the measurement with your interface with the customer.
Well, I would say you add those, yes, because your measurements of number of products, things like that, you still want, but now you have the ability to look at the progress the customers are making and measure those as well. Then you could speed things up. In fact, that was something they looked at. They were looking at when these men would come in and buy milkshakes, they realized that what they wanted was to get in and out quickly. Well, how long was that taking? Well, they actually ended up making a special drive-through. So now they can say that with these drive-throughs, they get their milkshakes in 3 minutes. When they had to come into the store, it was 6 minutes. So that would be a measurement for how fast are we doing things. Yeah, that's a great question because I hadn't
Thank
tied it
you.
together explicitly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, now let's go to the third one. Hopefully we'll get to both of these, but we'll see. I think we will. Okay, creating alignment. So I'm now going to talk about this. So what does it take to get alignment across the value stream? And I'm going to suggest it only takes 3 things. Now, I know alignment is one of the biggest problems people have in the agile space. But again, it's because they're not doing the things they need to be doing to get alignment, not because it's all that difficult. One of the things is you have to agree, you have to have a shared vision. What is it we're building? Most of the time, we don't have this. A shared vision is like, what's our next release going to be? You know what? There's actually no term for that in the popular agile frameworks. Epics aren't that. Increments aren't even that. An increment is a step in that release, perhaps. What's the actual release? Actually, a sprint can have multiple releases in it. In fact, some people increment continuously. So you need a shared vision. You need visibility of the work so you can see what needs to happen. And you need to have understanding of how we work together, explicit workflows, basically. This was, by the way, the big thing that Kanban brought in. I know Kanban talks about a lot of stuff. People forget. David Anderson and I were the two who formed Lean Kanban University. I was the Lean guy, he was the Kanban guy, and then it became Kanban University when I left. But one thing we agreed on a lot, but one thing we really agreed on was visibility of workflow, explicit workflow, which you almost never see in the agile space. Some people say it's you can't create one or that then people tend to follow it, but no, it's just an agreement on how you're working together. So let's look at this. Now, this I know is big. I should have probably shifted this a little bit. This is a diagram I'm working on. But here's the point. You could just a quick view of you could look through. Here's like the stakeholders. These are consuming stakeholders, sponsoring stakeholders. We figure out what we're going to do. We do product management, goes through development, comes back. We learn from the customers. We do plan, do study act. That's all I need. Don't worry about all this. The 4 black boxes are the things I want. These people are thinking in terms of objectives. These people are thinking in terms of features. These people are thinking how to implement it. This is how to release and support it. Notice what you're looking at are objectives, features, code, release, and support. That's not alignment. That's local optimization. Jobs to be done provides objectives, provides the jobs to be done. And basically, everybody can now see line of sight to the objectives. We had great success with this at Net Objectives, which predates jobs to be done. But like I said, we're doing a lot of this stuff, and then jobs to be done kind of, oh, this is what we've been doing. It's so nicely stated. So instead of having people looking at different things, we're all now can see, yes, we're building code here. Yes, we're defining what needs to be built, but we can all see the objectives. This creates that first step, common vision. Okay. It's like you've probably heard this, the parable of the bricklayers. This guy goes and he sees one bricklayer building something. He says, well, what are you doing? I'm building bricks. I'm laying bricks. Or, well, I'm building a wall. Or I'm building a church. We're creating a place where people can connect with God. What we want to do is shift people from here to here. You know, I give a little story to this. I shop at places. I've got a variety of places I like shopping. Costco is one of my favorite places. And they demonstrate something. Their people demonstrate something I don't see in a lot of other places, but I know they have a common vision of the customer experience. And part of it is I see people who clearly have a well defined job, but do things that are outside of their well defined job to make my experience better. You see this in good stores, they help you out. They just do things. Oh, and I just notice stuff like that. That's the vision. That's somebody saying, I'm not putting these carts away. I'm making the experience of the shopper better by doing these other things I notice. That's not in my job description. Nordstrom's is famous for this. Now, parable of aligned teams, I'm implementing a story. I'm creating a feature. I'm working on a release. I'm adding value to the stakeholders. This is alignment. Jobs to be done creates what you can see to create this alignment. Now I need one other thing for this. This is a quickest valuable release. This has been the heritage. I'm not going to go into this much. I've got hours on this. Call it a quickest valuable release. Its original thing was from minimum marketable feature, which if you've heard it from SAFE, ignore everything you learned from SAFE. They reference the source and they give it the same name, but the MMF in SAFE has nothing to do with the MMF and software by numbers. I don't care if that's what they say it does. No, it's just totally wrong. There's no such thing as an MMF in the UX, Lean UX, which I love that book, but that's another issue. A QVR is a minimum, is a clear description of the minimum amount of value that can be realized from the stakeholders using it that's worth the transaction cost. It details all the steps required for its release and realization. This doesn't mean you just release something because you can. You've got to look at the bigger picture. Like if you're going to be selling a house, maybe you need to get it in really good view before you sell it. So, well, I could sell it, but I'm going to wait a little bit to make sure it's all I want. It's got to be the smallest amount to get out there. It's got to be worth the transaction cost as well. Sometimes it's worth bunching up a bunch of small releases to get out. Not because you can't do CI/CD, but because the customer doesn't want it in little pieces. And sometimes the customer wants it in little pieces. That's worth the transaction cost. You got to pay attention to that. It's valuable from their perspective and the business perspective. It's not just the customer. It represents what's going to be released. This enables you. It's also fully kitted as it is a theory of constraints. This means it can be consumed. All the pieces are there. The QVR is not a reason to deliver less. It helps delivering sooner. That's really the key. Okay. So teams doing, we talk about herding cats, given features and story, they'll build what they build in the easiest way they know how. This is why it's so hard to coordinate teams, except it's not hard to coordinate teams. It's also not hard to coordinate cats. Cats are the easiest thing to get them to do what you want, as long as you make what you want them to do what you want them to do. That's the trick. Okay. You see this multiple teams. This is where I created kind of, I guess, in 2008, I created something that was like Scrum at Scale. It was 10 years before Scrum at Scale. But all I did was basically align the teams so they didn't make local choices. Scrum at Scale, I call it BLAST, the Basic Lean Agile Solution Team. I created it in an hour. They implemented it immediately. It was massive change because I just gave them some way to align around. Now with cats, okay, it's, what you want to do. People won't consider integration costs. They won't consider the time from start to end. They'll just look at their job. Teams tend to locally optimize. That's usually what they're based on. They won't look at the QVRs. So this creates waste when you do local optimization. So we use QVRs. What you're getting next. How do we get that? That creates this picture for alignment. In the same way I use a laser pointer with cats. Boy, they align on a laser pointer like you won't believe. You get them chasing up and down however you want. Okay, QVRs are like laser pointers for cats. Okay, it focuses both everybody, and it can be used within a value stream or across value streams. This is why it's important. This comes from Art of Action. I'll put a reference in this book. We did a summary of it that's really good. It's quick to read. It's a great book. The more alignment you have, the more autonomy you can give, but this requires what and why are the objective. So jobs to be done is very consistent with this. It's up to them to figure out the how, but you create this bigger picture. With an understanding how delays cause waste, they'll naturally align with other teams. So yes, this is why I integrate some of the Amplio work into jobs to be done to make jobs to be done thinking. You need to understand how delays cause problems, how to eliminate delays. Okay. The less alignment you have, the more coordination. If you have an approach that requires coordination, say Scrum of Scrums, or something like that, or how you manage agile release trains, what you're doing is that's just a symptom of not having enough alignment, not having enough vision. So now you have to coordinate things. You're missing your laser pointer. We have to shift from the team's goals to the organization's goals. Okay, questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, Kevin.
Hi. So you said a lot of agile frameworks are lacking the shared vision, but in the Scrum guide, there's the product goal.
Yeah.
Is that not the laser point, or and could a QVR, I think, could be the product goal? Or
So yes. So great question, Kevin. I love the challenge. So if you're doing Scrum and you put QVRs in the product goal, then that would be a big step in the right direction. However, they don't talk about something like the QVR. The product goal could be the whole product goal. Well, maybe you want to deliver it and do this and then do this and then do this. They don't talk about that. Now you can add it. No question you can add it. So a lot of these concepts are quite good to add to whatever it is you're doing, but they're not there. And this assumption that you're going to figure it out has been shown not to be true. I mean, most people, I have never gone into a team that had in all the teams I've gone into, which has been hundreds. No, that's not true. That's not true. One team I went into where I created Blast, like the precursor, if you want to call it Scrum at Scale, because actually Jeff Sutherland had been there before me. He'd been in there. I came in after him. And these people were doing Scrum great. And they were even doing QVRs or the equivalent of it. I forgot what they called it. But that was rare. What they weren't doing, though, was a way to align around the QVR. And that's what Blast was. So you said you had two questions. What was the other one?
yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's going back regarding user stories and job stories. In your view, is there ever a situation where a user story is a better choice?
No, I've never seen it. I hate user stories. As simple as
Okay.
that. They're archaic. They look at the wrong thing because let me tell you why. Just the general structure is wrong. But are your systems only for users? Maybe it's a regulatory agent that you've got to be considered. They're not using your system. You're giving them stuff. You're trying to be, you have to prove that you're following government regulations. Are the business people that are sponsoring it user stories? So I don't use user stories. If I wasn't doing jobs to be done, at a minimum, go to stakeholder stories. Talk about the consuming stakeholders, which might not be using the system at all. They may be talking to people who use the system. Is an attorney or a accountant of a company a user of your software, or do they talk to the owner who gets the information from your system and puts it into QuickBooks and then they get that? User is so limited that and then now you're thinking and talking about users. We don't think and talk about what we see what we're able to think and talk about. So we don't even see all these things we're missing until we go to release it. And now it requires a separate release, a second release to fix it because of this myopic view. Now, can you add and extend? Absolutely, you can add and extend. But then there are other things, and I don't have time to go into the fallacies of the Scrum model. Sorry. You need inherent simplicity to totally create what you're doing. Inherent simplicity is the idea from theory of constraints that there are a few factors that explain basically what's going on, the cause and effect in the system. Now, what's misunderstood when people talk about this, it doesn't mean we see them all. I agree. Sometimes you can only, I agree with, people who worry about complexity. Some of these can only be seen after the fact, but they are there. And what you can do is by having enough of the things that are there that you can see, you can protect yourself. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's in the next section. So I'm just going to go ahead to that.
All right. And just a quick one on the job stories. Do you still advocate furnishing those with acceptance criteria?
Oh, absolutely. I've been in acceptance test-driven development from the very beginning. And if you send me a note, I can give you references. In fact, I'm going to even mention that. It's funny you asked that.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's see. Okay, I'm gonna. Oh, good. Just hang on 1 second. I'm gonna pause this recording. Hang on 1 second. Hey, sweetie. We're gonna leave about 5 minutes late. That's okay. Traffic's not good. Okay, but I'm not. I'm just letting you know. I didn't forget. I'll come. Okay. Oh, well, anyway, sorry about that. Okay, so let's go to this last one. And Kevin, I think this will address a variety of your things. By the way, we do spend a session on in the Amplio journey on job stories and how you write them and how they're better. And I think I've even written something there. So I'll add a reference. I actually wrote up a paper, actually ChatGPT, and I use ChatGPT a lot to help me get these ideas in play. So anyway, this is one of the big extensions that I can't go into in detail, but I'll allude to it. Okay. I assert, and by assert, I mean I have evidence for, and by evidence for, I mean virtually every place I've ever gone into, that now I wasn't using jobs to be done. I was using workflow, theory, constraints, flow, things like that. But it fits well with jobs to be done. That there are 7 ways at least that I identified. So, like Agile says, welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Now, I think there's some flaws in the manifesto, but this one is dead on. You cannot avoid this, and you don't even try to avoid it at some level. The issue, though, is it doesn't mean the changes have to cause unnecessary rework. I used to build a lot of software in the 80s and 90s before I became a consultant, and I had very little rework when the requirements changed on me because of the way I built the system. This is what I learned from Flores and what jobs to be done gives us. It's a way to look at it from the big picture, align how you're doing, and it enables you to shift your work in the face of changed requirements. So we have to design our workflows so we can make late discoveries that as we make late discoveries, we minimize rework. Now, I don't think I'm the only one who knows this. I know I'm not the only one who knows this. I'm not even the only one who says this. People who do TOC, Tom Gilb, they may not say it this way, but this is very consistent with flow, theory, constraints, and lean. Not very consistent with the agile space. I've never heard this from there. Now, if you have, correct me, please. The reason I say this is not that I'm so brilliant. I did not mean to imply that. What I meant is if you're looking at flow, lean, and the theory constraints, this will be a natural thing to look at. And if you're not, it won't be. That's my point. That's why I'm not making one team wrong and the other team better. I'm saying this team is not looking at this and it's causing problems, and this team is looking at this and they're solving the problems. The lesson is look at this stuff. And I admit I'm a little frustrated because it's very hard to get people from one to the other sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to talk mostly in here about how alignment, and then this I know you can't read it. This is basically where we talk about how to define the product, create, what our vision rather, how to define the product development, get it built and deployed. This is just a detailed map I took from one of our slides. So teams work together, reduce rework due to misunderstandings, lowering misunderstandings. If you have rework due to misunderstandings, lack of availability, and improper balance of capacity, meaning you have some bottlenecks, jobs to be done helps by creating this bigger picture. Remember, if you know what the vision is, you tend to naturally align. You don't have as many misunderstandings. People align to be available when it's necessary. People will take go out of their roles to help somebody else do something. The system becomes greater than its parts. You know what? That should be actually a positive thing. I don't know. I've made it look like let me just fix that now so I don't forget. The system becomes greater than its parts. This is what we want. This is a natural, notice this is a natural result of looking at the objectives and the progress. Assistant planning. Well, when you see the bigger picture, see how they need to work together. Helps the alignment, helps in planning because you know when you need to come together. I want to be clear about this. This is not extra stuff to do. This just naturally happens due to the design of the system. Most systems are designed on one hand. Here's a few things come from structures you figured out. That's kind of Scrum. Here's the other one. We'll give you everything you can do and tell you what to do. That's kind of safe. And what they're missing is how can you easily set up a system that lets you see the right things? This is the symbols that are used in design thinking. See, by looking at discover, define, interesting thing about design thinking I got from ChatGPT is that you have this linear view and you integrate it into a process, and then details will change, but the objectives will change slower, if at all, actually. This is important. So as new requirements come in and the details change, that's fine. If you wrote your code, again, with acceptance test-driven development, by knowing the bigger picture, it makes it a lot easier. Okay. You can manage your WIP, work in process, because you've got to focus on finishing, control the level of work in process, reduces multitasking and delays in workflow, speeds up feedback, which reduces rework. Pivoting and less rework. If we discover we're solving the wrong problem or have a weak solution, we may need to pivot. Pivoting at a lower cost enables us to do it more quickly and more likely because there's less resistance to it. Human-centered design and design thinking into jobs to be done makes it so developers tend to look more at the customer. You don't need as much UX people, which are often bottlenecks, and often then the work going back and forth between the UX, that causes rework. By the way, notice, Kevin, notice when you talk about, your definition of done. Notice that looking at the job and the progress and how they're going to use it is a kind of, well, how will I know I've done that? That's the first step in defining the definition of done. This is kind of built into the jobs to be done. It's not something we're added, it's just an inherent part of it. And this improves the quality of what's going out because you are building it for the way they want to use it. You're seeing what their real job is. There's more function, it's easier to use. And it's also how the product was built. Okay, so I'm sorry I don't have as much time as I would normally like to have questions, but I got 2 or 3 more minutes. So Kevin, I want to make sure I answered your question though, because it was very astute. And what I would suggest is user stories. This is another aspect of systems. User stories are, I mean, there's another problem with user stories. Is user stories can be huge or they can be tiny, and the question is how do you break them down? So people have come up with things like, test-driven development, test first, behavior-driven development, things like that. In the jobs to be done model, there's actually a way to start with job stories and then break those down into slices. So you actually have a decomposition method built into the system. I didn't talk about that, but that is part of it. I should probably write something about why do we have all these different kinds of stories. And at first it looks like it's more complicated because instead of just epics, features, and stories, you have all these other things, but they're really just giving different names and different structure to what are actually separate concepts. Like here's a story that's might take me 3 weeks to do, and here's a story that I can build just a thin vertical slice. Okay, and also what's the context I'm in? Okay, so 2 minutes of questions, and sorry for not more. You can send me emails with questions and I can attach them, and you can also go to the LinkedIn group on it. And there is, if you're not in the community of practice, that's another great way to get questions asked. When I put this up on the website next day or two, I'll make sure all that information's there, and I'll send a note out to everybody who's registered. Okay, so other questions?
There's one in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Ah, great question. So I love JetPad. I would suggest the story mapping is something, or the equivalent of story mapping is something we do with how we use. So I guess I should say, metaphorically, yes. In other words, we're not building stories and features and things, but the idea of how you take the big thing and break it down, absolutely. That actually was part of the Amplio system with QVRs. How do you break QVRs down? And then jobs to be done is just a more defined way of doing it. So that's absolutely great. I'm glad you asked that question, because I should actually write something about that. I think Jeff's brilliant, but I think he's still working with kind of older technology of users and features for whatever reason. Any other questions?
Hi, Al. I have one more question for you.
Okay, this will be the last one because I do have to go, but thanks.
Okay. In one of the slides earlier, you talked about mindset and perspective, and I'm very curious about perspective, because perspective is something that tends to be refined when you actually say it, right? But the thinking behind the perspective, I'm curious about what you're discovering in that space.
Great.
Right?
I'm sorry, finish asking the question. Sorry, I shouldn't have said anything.
Yeah. No,
What's
I'm very
the-
curious about, and when you talk about perspective, it's a refined output from the person, but the thinking behind that perspective is curious, right?
Raymond, that's such a great question. Okay, so I'll give it a super quick answer. And I thought about this, but I never thought about talking about it like this. I don't know why. So I'll give you an example. Perspective is something that you look at in a certain way to get a better result. So when I'm talking to somebody and coaching somebody, you ever talk to somebody and coach them and they seem like they're being a bit of a jerk? They're being a bit defensive. They're being, who knows why they're being the way they are. So you're listening to them. So normally, if you just look at them and what they're saying, it's going to be bad, because if you're judging them, you're not going to do good. So part of this is mindset and perspective here. So part of it is, well, if I look at them and I say, okay, instead of listening to them complain, can I look at and see how they're doing in their position? Why are they complaining? Why is it that they're giving me all this grief? In other words, instead of just listening to what they're saying, I've got to shift to look at them in the system they're in. So my perspective shifts from their interaction with me to the system they're in, and then I can get empathy. Now, the mindset behind this is shift in perspective is a better way of doing things. I can't give you a deep answer now, but you've just opened up a whole paper for me. So the different perspective shifts could be why do you want to have these perspectives? What's useful about these perspectives, not just what they are. I did try to mention that, but I'll have to spend more time on that. And I do have to go now, but I appreciate y'all being here, and I appreciate that question in particular. All wonderful questions. So I'll be in touch, and we'll have a follow-up to this. I think maybe the jobs to be done thinking is something I should just keep doing as we go deeper, because it's so important. I'll follow up an email. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, here we go.